right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're dialing in from. Thank you guys for joining us today. You have joined the Think Regeneration session number 2. My name is Ryan Slabaugh, and I'm with Think Regeneration. I'll be moderating tonight's episode. Denise Nickel on our team is also be joining us. If you have any questions about the format or programs or what we're doing tonight, please ping her, and we're happy to get back to you and make sure you're aware. This is a lot of what we do for the first time. For anybody who's hasn't joined one of our live programs in person or with us on a virtual session or worked with us on the ground in one of our programs around the country, we're a 501c3 nonprofit that helps regenerative farmers and regenerative movement achieve its goals. We do everything from helping create economic development programs to creating peer-to-peer learning programs to working with the wonderful folks who are trying to make this movement work. And some of those folks are on this call tonight to be our guests, including Tucker and Merideth Garrigan with EnSoil, and I know Camille on their team is joining us as well this evening. So thank you so much for being here. We ran into this group a couple years ago when we were just starting our nonprofit. They were recommended to us from a biologist at Rutgers University named Dr. James White that many of you might be familiar with, who really saw some extraordinary things happening with the algae when it was applied into crop and pasture systems. And as it turns out, life begets life. And that's really the lessons that we're learning as we apply living things into our crop systems and start to change the paradigm away from killing and controls and into feeding and support and symbiotic relationships. And Tucker and Meredith have taught us so much about how you can approach a startup with kindness, with generosity, and by trying to build community and not just through domination and controls and world, and the same things that have gotten us into this place in the first place, and the same type of behavior. And so we're really here to support them and their message and what they're doing. The community of growers here, we really support and really welcome you guys here. We want to make this format an open format. We're going to hear from these guys and we're going to ask them some questions and have them introduce themselves here in a second. And then we're going to just open up the conversation to really achieve three things. One, to talk about this idea of transitioning and where it is in 2025.
Oh my God.
We talk about our farming systems.
You're
We're going to talk about the managing the science behind field trials and kind of compare notes for those in the group who are doing their own trials and doing their own tests. How are you guys doing those? And what type of support do you need to really make sure you can trust what you're seeing on paper and both in the field and really make the good decisions both on inputs and management systems and going and marketing as well. What can you say? And then we're going to talk about, if we have time, what we're planning and do a little bit of crystal ball looking and what we should be planning for this year and look ahead and try to see where we're all thinking about 2025. So Tucker, Meredith, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Meredith, would you want to introduce yourself and then turn it over to Tucker?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having us. We, have definitely been building community of growers and everyone in between from farm to plate, and we've enjoyed really working with you guys. I'm Merideth Garrigan. I know a lot of you here. Thank you for joining us, everyone who's on this journey with us. And I work in research and partner development, and mostly here to listen. Again, the more I listen, the more I learn. And we had 4 brand new epiphanies last week just with our soil consultants and our lab partners and things. So I'm excited to hear what our growers have to say here, and just really appreciative, of the work together.
Thanks, Meredith and Ryan. Yeah, thank you again for all the work y'all are doing. We really enjoy everything we get every time we get engaged with you and Denise and the team. I really love the topics here. I spend a lot of time on the road meeting with growers, whether it's at a conference or it's our own events or just riding around in the truck. Two things you touched on, which I think are really sort of the critical things that can help us all build momentum. I mean, foundationally, it's how do we analyze the soil so we can measure biology and know how to make management decisions based on those measurements. There's a tremendous amount of power in the life in our soil. We just need to learn how to work in conjunction with it, in collaboration with it, rather than controlling it. And then the big part here is the economics. I'm really excited because we've got a good cross section here of people at different stages of this strategy, this journey that we can hear from. And what we're really after proving to mainstream ag is that the economic barriers that have sort of been existed and been understood are coming down. Technologies like ours and others are enabling it. It's a combination of the power of the biostimulants, the quality of the technology for measuring and understanding the life that's already in the soil, and then the expertise of the farmers and ranchers who are implementing the management practices. As these things converge, the economic equation changes. It changes dramatically. And from where I'm standing, there is absolutely no conflict between soil health and on the better on-farm economic outcome. I think they're directly correlated, and in years past, maybe they've seemed in some sort of opposition to each other. But I don't see that after 4 years of traveling and speaking with farmers and ranchers all over the country. So excited to get into it, and I really appreciate everybody's participation today.
Well, thanks. Well, yeah, let's go ahead and get into it, I guess. And we're going to go ahead and, we got a manageable group here. I think if everybody could be respectful, we'll be happy to, use the raise your hand tool in this program. If you want to raise your hand and go ahead and ask the question, we'll go ahead and call on you and do that. Or just go ahead and post something in the chat as well and flag it and say, hey, I got a question and here's my question, and we'll go ahead and get it answered. But we would like to hear, to go back to Tucker and Meredith a bit, on this idea of transitioning in 2025. I know, Tucker, for example, you were just, boy, in Montana and Kansas and Arizona, and I'm sure I'm missing a few states as you've been driving around. What are the common themes that you see around this idea? And really, when we talk about transitioning, it's moving from conventional synthetic systems and into more biological systems. And we know that a lot of growers are on that track that we work with, certainly. So what are you seeing out there?
Well, the most common thing I see is actually one of the biggest challenges, and that's a big gap in the awareness of how to measure biology in the soil. We've been really fortunate with EnSoil Algae in that the results have been consistent and compelling, but a lot of the times it's being sprayed out there. It's not necessarily being measured in the soil before or after. And so while we're getting good results, um, the farm or the ranch is not really in any better position to understand how they need how the biology is going to adapt and how they need to make management decisions based on those changes year over year. So the most common thing to me is a big project that we all have in educating farmers around the technologies that are available to measure biology in the soil and getting them comfortable with it. And so if we talk about policy things that can be done, let's fund that. Um, there's a lot of people working really hard to help promote that, but it needs more effort.
Mhm.
The second theme is that where we do have measurements of biology in the soil, we're seeing the outcomes that we have been promoting come to fruition. That means there's an opportunity to reduce the input on fertility and even crop protection and supplement with boosting your biology. And that creates a better production outcome. It creates a better economic outcome. It creates a better outcome with water on the farm, and it creates a better nutrient outcome in whatever's being produced. Meredith, you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the decisions that farmers have to make strategically throughout the season are complex, and sometimes a moving target. So, I think taking the first step or the second step, even into anything new in the program, that we lack that support of education. So we've really focused on that. Why are you seeing these improvements, like Tucker said? And when a grower knows why this improvement has been made, they're more apt to keep up with that practice. Just like any of us, I'll eat that food if I know why it's so good for me, and start seeing the benefits and things like that. So that part, seeing the pattern that everybody's taking a step somewhere along the way. It may be some folks' first step into a biological approach, and it may be somewhere near the end where they've been, working on their recipe for years or decades, where they still want to learn and add something new that's, pretty potent. Something like algae is pretty potent. and synergistic in the system. So it's really, you know, really been exciting to see people along the way. But that pattern of, you know, wanting to know more and then wanting to share what you've learned is what I'm seeing in this space, and I really love that. There's not as much competition. So this is works for me, so I'm going to keep this from everyone. Instead, it's this is works for me. Let me show you what I did and where I made my mistakes, just like we're doing here tonight.
Makes sense. So maybe let's go through the journey of it. You know, a farmer who's moving through these systems and trying to transition a bit, and kind of what you're seeing overall. Maybe we'll pick a couple different, you know, common places on the spectrum, if you will, where we find a lot of farmers. So let's talk. Maybe let's start early on with a farmer who's just starting. Say they've got a large, you know, a medium to large scale farm. They've been using mostly conventional systems for the most part. They maybe perhaps have just inherited the farm from their father or grandfather or cousin or uncle, and they're looking to do something a little differently. And they know they've been hearing about biologicals. They've maybe gone to a soil health conference, and now they're coming back and going, okay, now what? How do I start this thing? How do I actually dip my toes in the water, or do I go all in, or what's the right rate of change to really make sure that A, I'm learning, and B, that I'm also being careful too.
Well, I don't know if Jason fits that description exactly, but I know he's been down this path a little bit, but still working on his strategy and the best places to start. Jason, you mind sharing a little bit about your background and where you're at with your work and the what you're trying to do with the biology on your farm and
Sure.
and what you're trying to accomplish?
My name is Jason Opine. I farm Northeast Iowa. I spent 20 years after college in Chicago. I worked at the Chicago Board of Trade, was a broker for 15 years. And in 2017, things had changed a lot at the board. We'd had kids, got married. It was time for a change. So we made the move back to the farm. I had kind of been researching regenerative agriculture before that, running across names like Jason Mock, Mitchell Hora, Gabe Brown, Ray Archuleta, and dove into the biology side of it. My dad had sold chemicals and liquid fertilizers for 40 years. So we'd always used something like that on our farm. When I came home, he had been doing some cover crops, but it was mostly because the NRCS would pay him enough to put that cover crop out, and it was predominantly under the understanding that we were just saving soil from erosion. So I came back with all these ideas of systems in the soil and biology and how we could increase our organic matter, increase our carbon, increase our biology, and then they feed more so we would have healthy plants. So I started tackling healthy plants. I wanted healthy plants, and then started learning more about it. And I think that's kind of a keystone in all of this is knowledge. And the more you learn, the more questions you have, the more there is to learn. And that's because it's a system. One is working with the other all the time. So if you're being a farmer and forceful and trying to get a goal or an achievement, you're going to force something, and that's going to cause a problem. So the more I learn, the more I understand that I have to back off of my synthetics and ease them off, but at the same time, I'm still a farmer, and yield goals are important because they do pay bills. So I've studied the biology side of it, trying to learn what root exudates work best with what biology, what gets activated. We have a soil health group in our area that we started just because we're all making mistakes and trying some crazy stuff. So it's kind of a support group where we can bounce ideas off each other and how things went wrong and what I missed. Somebody can tell me what I could do different that it might make it work. And we have DNR in the group. We have NRCS in the group. We have a microbiologist in the group, just to bring understanding and gain more knowledge so that we can push it further. I think it's a great thing that can do great things for the future. There's so much understanding that has to come with it to actually make it work. And that's difficult, especially when the average farmer you talk to is 65 years old. And now you're trying to tell them they need to change, and telling someone they need to change is telling them that they did it wrong before, and that's difficult. So it's a touch and go situation, and you just present things and make people think and try and turn switches on and make them search for more. You know, if you try cover crops, the next step is you start thinking about cattle. I mean, that's where I'm at now. And I have a farm operation with 125,000 turkeys raised every year. So I really don't have a desire to have animals, but I know that's another further step for more biology, a faster approach to repairing my soil. Did I cover some aspects?
That
here?
was great. Yeah, absolutely. That was fantastic. I'm wondering, Jason, you know, when you were going down that journey, when you started first to look at soil health as a tactic on your farm, were you testing, or did you do soil testing early on, or SAP testing? Was there kind of some baselines that you went down to kind of understand where you started?
We soil test every other year. So we do half of the farm and then we do the other half the next year. So we've always soil test. I'm studying more of Albrecht stuff and Neil Kinsey stuff and trying to create balance, because before it was always very high is great. Well, now we're talking about staves and binding and nutrients that aren't available. But then that helps me work in the conversation of biology again, of we can break some of those bonds. We can get those nutrients when needed if that's there. So we're doing more species now rather than just rye. We're working in camelina. I'm always putting an oat in with it. Before our corn acres now, we're using wheat instead of the rye. And we're doing more Haney testing to kind of see where our carbon burst is at and how our carbon is building. But as far as gathering data to chart it out, no, we haven't gotten there yet. I feel like I'm scrambling really fast now just to keep up. So it's hard to be the scientist also.
You said it. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I appreciate the Albrecht and Kinsey references. I'm curious, are you measuring any of the, you know, cation exchange capacity or any kind of those facets in your soil?
Yep. We always get the base percent, so the base saturation, and the calcium mag is something I look at very closely now. And I learned of Neil Kinsey from going to a conventional farmer seminar at the Hefty Boys in South Dakota. So I'm a person that believes we can all work together. I mean, we're all trying to achieve the same thing, and that grow into something. So if we can meld ideas, I think that's better than pointing fingers and putting people on the ropes. So I have a lot of very conventional friends, and I have some organic friends. I have some biodynamic friends. So I think it can all come together. And I use that in my turkeys too. I learn more from organic guys because I'm trying to be antibiotic free. And that has to do with nutrient loads and vitamins that I can use before problems arise. So I don't have to hit an easy button. And the soil is the same way. If you can build that biology and understand how it works and when your fast times are or your slower times, then you can propel it further and get a healthier plant. Tucker, because I think EnSoil and the way that algae works with biology is going to make this easier to get off of some synthetics and build my biology faster. Northeast Iowa is not a great growing point for cover crops. It's kind of chilly.
Yeah, I would think you'd have about 3 weeks, maybe at most, to get something in after harvest. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Well, we have a couple questions. Thank you for asking. They were curious, how often are you soil testing, and what are you finding that you're then, you know, how is that determining your decision making overall, or how's that, you know, helped you make input decisions? And then also any thoughts on other, you know, pieces of the biological puzzle like fish emulsion, wood chips or mulch, etc.?
We use our turkey litter. So we have meat birds, and their bedding is wood shavings. Sometimes I'll use oat hulls. So there's a lot of carbon in that. So I guess that's kind of like using wood chips in my field. There's a big fungal component of it because it sits out back. It's not composted. We don't turn it, so it is pretty stagnant. I don't use any fish emulsions. I do use humates. I've come across those now 3 years. This will be the third year. The first year I did some tests. The last year I used it in all my fields. And that helped me cut back some nitrogen because there's a binding component there, a holding component. And again, feeds biology. So it's like I told Tucker, I'm kind of agnostic in that I'm standing on both sides of the fence. I'm conventional on one side, but I'm trying to become biological. I do have a father that he is the farmer. He is the farm, and he will be the farm until he's under the farm. So I will never have total control. I have to show results to somebody.
I appreciate that. Our program's gonna be working with in the Pacific Northwest in a few weeks with some landowners and their tenants on this issue exactly, and bringing everybody together to try to look at biological, soil management, what that means, how do you actually appreciate an asset on the farm and not just pay depreciation every year, and can we look at soil as one of those aspects. We see a lot of management plans around the country where people have equipment management plans and contracts with their landowners. They have structure management plans on keeping up the structures on the farm, but very few have soil management plans that they agree on and sit down and go, this is how we're going to manage the soil and make this better. And so I think that's one of the shifts that we can see and we can encourage, is just having that conversation on an annual basis if we can get there with landowners around them.
And I love that, changing soil into an asset, because right now it is a liability. If you're a full synthetic program, you have to continually feed that plant, and it's because your soil is not doing it for you, and that's a liability. Liabilities have to be paid into. Assets make you money, and it just makes sense to get the soil working for you and step back and let it go. That's a true asset.
Absolutely. Appreciate that. Tucker, there's a question for you in the chat about how you recommended measuring soil biology and also the soil food web.
So I'm gonna actually, if you don't mind, I'll touch a little bit on this. What does the algae do? And then I want Meredith to jump in on how we're measuring, because it segues right in. So what the algae, this is a freshwater microalgae. It's found all over the world, in every body of freshwater in the world. And when it's deposited on soil, and sort of think of a river delta environment, when floodwaters recede, this algae gets deposited on soil. It releases signaling molecules, and it's basically telling all of the microorganisms that the conditions are right to get active. There's a fuel source here. And so it's the phytohormones in the algae that wake up and stimulate biological activity. So what we're going to be attempting to do in at Jason's farm is apply the algae and have it actually enhance and complement what he's already doing. He's already got that carbon out there that's going to help feed the biology. And so we're going to just amplify what's going on there. If you get the biology working, that's your primary driver of nutrient cycling. That's why Herb's got the best oranges in the Southeast, or maybe anywhere. It's the biology that's driving the nutrition, but in the act of doing that, it's also creating all the structure you need in your soil, so your water can be infiltrated more efficiently, and you can hold it better. And all of these things are what tie to economic outcomes that are better for the farmer. So what the algae is doing is stimulating and feeding the biology. It's enhancing chlorophyll in the plants, and it's giving the plants some additional stress adaptation. And Meredith, you want to explain the various testing methodologies we use?
Yeah. Like Tucker said, we have, after application of algae, we're using several methodologies to measure improvement in the system. We have, we utilize Haney test, we utilize a PLFA. We like to use genomics testing. And we're also using plant tissue, sap analysis, and we're moving into studying phytochemicals. Now, what we're trying to do below ground is help tell the story of functionality. By layering in many different methods of soil testing. Is for us, we want to use as many learning tools as possible to see all aspects of this very complex system. It would be very hard for a grower to run all of these samples. So, we've tried to create a support team with our different lab partners, with our consultants, to help the growers kind of pull these samples and understand what's happening. These samples are showing us increased soil respiration. We're seeing initially the very biggest jump that we see after adding the algae is an increase in microbial diversity and mass, which lends to that soil respiration increase. These things, are measured through the Haney test and also total nutrient digestion. What do we have there in the soil? I mean, just last week we were looking at our TNDs and Liz noticed, well, we're looking at this long-term fertility being increased by supporting the life in your soil, where the mindset in the past has been that we're mining those soils, and that's, depleting those soils because we're mining them in this way. But when you're supporting that microbial life and really watching this through these measurables, you can see that we are helping increase soil functionality, which lends to long-term fertility. It's just like diversifying anything in your life is going to create more resilience. It's about risk management. And so we really use these tools to teach, but also to help the grower make these steps through the transition. So they're not so scary, they're not so risky, and that we're all learning together along the way. I don't know if I left out, but bricks measurements, looking at chlorophyll meters. There's so many different tools to show improvement, and we're trying to tap into each of them. I think it's important to say too, we work with growers all over the country and in 15 other countries right now. Everyone has a different way of measuring improvement, and they really love, the labs they work with. And we try to work with each grower and what they're comfortable in doing, but then add some of the things we've learned along the way. And it's most important that they're going to be able to share this with their community. So something that's widely accepted to them, or a lab that's widely accepted to their community, is the most important, because just like Jason said, we're creating this knowledge base and bioregional approach. And, people feel like they're in silos working alone on their fields a lot of the time. But what happens is we travel around and talk to so many growers. We know someone right down the road that they might not have known that's doing this as well. So we're constantly trying to pair growers together, and then just sit back and listen to, how they're learning the system or what they've done.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Knowing we want to cover a couple topics on this, I think that's a pretty decent segue into kind of this idea of managing trials and testing trials, and like, how do we on our farms measure twice and cut once, I guess, just to get to the punch and make sure we don't have to go recorrect things that we're doing in the field, and we keep making continual progress. I know Herb's done a lot of that on his farm, and I know there's quite a few testers on this group who are trying to explore how we measure this stuff and how we actually make decisions on this stuff. So, Tucker and Merideth, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about kind of starting that conversation overall, looking at, what type of trials are you seeing going on, and, even like what size of trials you're seeing going on, and how are people and farmers and ranchers, comparing the results and trying to work together. We've already heard Jason mention he's working with a group of, peer-to-peer learning where they're working together on these things. Are you seeing groups who are actually able to coordinate on trials too at this? So let's start that conversation. Merideth, Tucker?
I'll send this over to Tuck, but first I just want to say we, while we're going through our data from 2024, we were just on a call, and I forgot to mention we're also utilizing metagenomics, which are fascinating ways to learn about the interactions and each of these bacterial and fungal species roles in the microbiome and in creating a healthy crop and a really resilient stress resilient crop. But we were covering several different kinds of samples: a metagenomics, a Haney, a TND, and a tissue sample. And one of the lab consultants said, "This is the first time I've had a meeting where someone brought all of their samples and wanted to look at them all integrated." And I think that may be that could cause a real problem. There's a lot of different measurables in there. So we're seeing this holistic approach to helping the grower really grow, and more collaboration amongst technologies is what we need in order to learn the most, the quickest, and the safest. So I think that's been really my favorite part, is integrating and collaborating all of these groups together to learn more. We're just devouring so much new information. And then Camille's on this call. Camille helps us, really summarize and tell this beautiful story through our growers reports for our growers and our other partners that we're working with in the field, other biochar, vermicompost teas, cover crops, whatever else we're utilizing in that system. We're really sharing information across the board so everyone can learn together.
Ryan, the spectrum of trials that it really is a spectrum, right? So the vast majority are with our farmers doing check strips. And it could be as just simple as, I've got flags, or I can, I've marked where the algae's gone. And then, obviously we're bringing in the Haney tests. We really want everybody to get familiar with the Haney test. It's a technology that's deployable at scale by the farmers themselves. Meredith touched on the metagenomics and the DNA analysis of the soil. That's helping us understand how our product actually influences the organization of the microbiome, and how that correlates to nutrient acquisition in the plant. Very cool stuff. It's very validating, and we're seeing how the organizations actually and the plant microbe communication is really doing what it needs to on its own. Let's not poison it and support it. That nutrient acquisition is pretty strongly correlated with yield as well. Not always, but so those are the things that we're learning, that we're funding. But I'd actually like to get Jay Lane into the conversation. Jay has done a really cool job with his check strips. He gives us some of our best visual info. And Jay, you're pretty far down this. I mean, multiple years of working on your soil, and you're one of the most efficient we know in terms of input reduction and production. So if you don't mind sharing your program.
Yeah, so I'm not going to speak to the soil health aspect of it because I'm not versed enough to do it. I can speak in terms of yield and dollars. I made a couple notes here. In soybeans over the last 2 years, we have doubled the amount of pods on the top 3 nodes. I think I've sent you pictures, Tucker. On average, across every acre that I've tried it on, which is now over 2 years, it's been about 2,200 acres, is a 4 to 9 bushel increase across those acres. It's a $90 value on the average crop sale. And then in corn, last year, when we had a horrible drought, very stressful summer, I saw better results then than I did in a good year where everything yields. Corn was a 15 to 28 bushel increase when you compile everything over the course of 2 years, over 600 acres of corn. That's $140 value just in straight head-to-head yield, treated and untreated. So, and that's how I run the business. I farm 2,500 acres. We hay 700. Haven't applied anything to the hay ground yet. We discussed doing that, going forward. I partnered with another group to fund some of the Haney testing, so that'll be good to cost share some of that, take care of some of that cost, and really integrate this and help me understand, what I can do. Another report that a guy from Virginia Tech and I put together was interesting. I just want to make a comment on this. Phosphorus uptake in corn. My typical starter fertilizer, and Tucker and I have discussed, I've been able to all but cut out 100% of my nitrogen input on corn while sustaining yields, at least in head-to-head trials. So regardless of the average yield on the given year, we're still within 10% of yield given the nitrogen reduction with the algae applied. But in terms of phosphorus uptake, what we saw last year in corn was I'm putting out a 6.26.6 starter, and my yield is worse there, and my phosphorus available phosphorus is lower where the phosphorus is applied than it is where the algae is applied in furrow with no phosphorus. I thought I had some numbers here. 1.7 more kernels around on each ear of corn, and then you multiply that by 36,000 plants per acre. That's a significant yield increase. It's been a big collaboration with myself and this guy and a couple growers in Virginia. I think David Hula took part in some of this, but yeah, that's one of the aspects that I'd like to maybe touch on. It was more of a fungal dominant conversation in terms of biology and not being killed off by synthetic application. That was the most interesting thing. I'm always nitrogen. I'm always worried about nitrogen inputs. It's so expensive. Phosphorus isn't cheap either. None of it's getting any cheaper. And if we're killing off biologicals that carry the phosphorus to the plant, we need to be cutting back on that synthetic, maybe putting in some algae, helping carry that phosphorus to the plant, be more efficient in yield, and be easier on the pocketbook. I hope it didn't take too long.
No, that's great. And Jay, you've been no-till and cover crop for how many, 7+ years? Am I selling you short there?
No, I've been farming on my own for 5 years. Started 5 years ago. I've been no-tilling and cover cropping for 3 years, full scale. And we went from 0 cover crop acres to every single acre, just because I lost a ton of money the first couple of years I was farming, and then really kind of started figuring out what I needed to do.
Okay.
And we've really kind of honed in on this. I mean, from a plant health aspect, just from a drone shot or riding down the road, you can definitely tell a difference. And then soil respiration, retaining water runoff, rainfall retention versus runoff. I mean, there's a noticeable difference in my fields versus conventionally tilled ground around me. So,
And now
water
you're
is
down
our limited.
You're down to a fraction of the applied nutrient of your county average, correct?
Oh my God, yeah, like we're fertilizing for 250 bushel corn, and I am expecting to maintain yield or be within 25 bushels of that with no nitrogen applied.
And a minimum.
We've achieved this before, but it's not consistent enough. I'm a very data-driven farmer, and I cannot justify applying nitrogen according to the analytics, but I still do it because, you got to apply nitrogen to corn to get it to grow. I'm too scared not to, but I shouldn't. According to the numbers, I should just cut it out, but I haven't brought myself to do that yet.
Well, excellent. Meredith, can you add a little bit of color? We talked about the phosphorus issue, and he actually mentioned David Hula, which is within that group we did the trials. Can you tell us about how we saw the influence of the algae on the mycorrhizal network and how important that is for phosphorus transfer?
Yeah, I mean, you just said it right there. We are seeing that very consistently as this phos cycling is supported by the mycorrhizae group. Algae and fungi are the oldest of friends. Billions and billions of years ago, formed a symbiotic relationship. So we do see in these tests, and the way we would be able to explain why you're seeing that phos cycling is that increase in our buscular and endo mycorrhizae. Christine Jones has a great bit of information that you could dive into about the carbon phosphorus cycling. And then, every time you apply one, you break the other as well. And you disrupt the other. So there's a whole cycling channel there that you've tapped into by reducing your nitrogen, Jay. And we're definitely seeing those on other tests where we're looking at nitrogen reduction side by sides.
We had a couple questions come in. And thank you guys. This is really good conversation. The question was, I believe for Jay, is what covers are you applying, and are you planting green, and when are you killing off the cover?
I plant green, kill it off immediately because in corn, specifically to corn, I'll spray and kill it. We roll it down and then spray a residual to keep everything clean because I grow non-GMO corn, so I don't have a glyphosate luxury. And like I said, I still want to maintain commercial yields and still market corn like a normal farmer. So I need weed protection, and that's the best way to do it. As far as cover species, the best cover crop I've found for corn is, and just strictly based on value for yield in corn, is monocrop and hairy vetch, and then managing that appropriately. But that does nothing for diversity or water infiltration or any of your typical soil health benefits that you'll get from a cover crop. Hairy vetch is just a massive potassium and nitrogen contributor to the soil. So if you can make that work, I've been able to be successful with a monocrop vetch. I have a biomass sample that I took last year. My monocrop vetch was able to achieve just above the ground, and a biomass sample from Regen Ag Lab was 300 pounds of nitrogen and 497 pounds of potassium available to the corn plant. So there's a lot of nutrients that are there. I just have to find a way to make them mobile and get them to the plant. But I'm a big fan of vetch. It's hard to manage, but we put out rye, black oats. I love black oats, crimson clover, Balanza clover, and hairy vetch. Vetch is my main crop, but I do a blend on almost every acre. But if I'm pushing corn ground, I'd say hairy vetch all the way.
And are you betting, Jay, in the long run? Oh.
You asked about nitrogen timing.
Yeah.
Late nitrogen may still pay. Yeah, I agree with that. Like I said, I definitely am a huge fan of applied nitrogen. But I mean, according to the last 3 years of research I've done on my farm, I would be okay not applying nitrogen. So basically, when you consider interest rates, any applied product that costs them cash out of pocket, or you're using a line of credit to apply, I don't think you can justify the nitrogen application, regardless of the timing, when you consider the yield output and then you compare those dollars. So if you look at it from a monetary standpoint, maybe it's a wash. From a yield standpoint, side by side, yeah, maybe you do increase the yield, but at the end of the day, bottom line, I don't think it increases your profit margin at all in comparison.
No, I appreciate that. This is a really important topic, because as we look at transitioning overall, that this is where we see a lot of growers really working hard at. And so I really appreciate this. There's a follow-up question. Thank you, Jay. The 20 pounds per hairy vetch, is that per acre? Yeah. So
that's the 20 pounds is monocrop. I'll put about 5 pounds in a blend. Okay. So because you don't want to choke out everything, vetch will net everything down and just kill everything.
Makes sense. And are you betting in the long term, Jay, that as you're applying biologicals and you're growing your soil organic matter a bit, that efficiency in the soil, that uptake of nitrogen, for example, will give you that confidence to go that last mile at some point? Or are there signals you're looking for in your soil testing or soil structure or soil that in itself that would give you the confidence?
It definitely should. I mean, my respirations increased year over year. Regardless of the season we've had or the yield or the previous crop, or you give me the variable and it's increased over time. I will say, well, not that this pertains to everybody, but Tucker and Merideth have been out to the farm. I farm in Northeast North Carolina below sea level, and most of my organic matter is above 20%. So I'm actually battling too high of organic matter and trying to retain water and really make everything balance. Like was mentioned before. So I've got plenty available. I just need to find a way to balance it out.
Amazing. All of our growers attending from Arizona just tuned off. They're like, just kidding. Yeah, that's amazing. Congratulations on that. Meredith, Tucker, I guess when you guys are working with trials and growers around the country like Jay, are you seeing that that type of ability to give? I mean, $50 an acre less nitrogen could be early retirement for a lot of farmers
Yeah.
around this country, generally speaking.
Yeah, I was happy that Jay touched on that ROI and how we're measuring improvement and cost savings. And we're always looking at that input cost, right, compared to the yield there. And there's a lot of different measurables in between. And yeah, we are seeing that with a lot of our growers, and we're helping shape our sampling program, soil sampling and tissue sampling and all these things along the way. So even if there's a nitrogen load at the beginning, we can maybe make a mid to season to late pass decision and hold back some of that, wherever we can find the cost savings and wherever the grower is comfortable doing that. We're just really working a program that suits them and where they're comfortable.
So I'll tell a quick story. So when we got into this, we reached out, and Jay was one of the farmers, and Russell Hedrick and Nelson Bird in Missouri and a couple others. We went to him and realized, look, what we're doing with small fruit and vegetable production in South Carolina is this is a different application on your acres, and we asked for some input on pricing. And I remember telling Russell, I was like, well, you're not accounting for the 40% reduction of nitrogen that we're going to start with, right? And he looked at me and kind of smirked. He's like, dude, nobody's going to do that. He said, good luck. And I said, well, that's our message. Like, this is what there's ROI right here. Let's cut nitrogen. And, of course, we were a bit naive, and that served us well because we just kept walking into people's dens and saying this. And so we've had enough. He was right? Most people say, no, I'm going to add algae to this thing and we're going to chase yield. And, we've been very fortunate that it's delivered in a lot of places, not everywhere. I mean, when guys are having great years, the algae in a couple spots, you're not moving the needle that much on 300 bushel corn. But in stressed environments, it certainly has shown up big time. But we've had enough people, and Brian Massard, who's on the call, is one of them, that had either been more motivated than we were to cut the nitrogen, or been willing to put some acres toward this and follow. So while I would say north of 80% of the growers that we've met and been able to work with have not been willing to cut nitrogen year one with the algae. Enough have that we're really building a cool data set and proving that there's too much nitrogen in the system anyway. It's detrimental to the communication process, and getting it out of the way at the same time you can stimulate your biology is that's a compounding effect. So I mean, Brian is one of the first guys that we met that was really motivated and about cutting his nitrogen, and he can tell, he can talk from that perspective.
Yeah, Brian, I'd love you to share that and then take it on into what you're planning for 2025 too, because I think I think everybody would love to hear. If Brian's still got a connection, where are you?
Sure, if I see Brian still on the call, he might have dropped off.
Did we drop Brian?
Cliffhanger.
I think he might have dropped off, but we'll follow up with him. But Brian, if you're on, just weigh on in here. But I think, no, what I'm hearing overall, and I think, we sound very similar to what other agronomists, guys like David Knaus and others around the country that have been talking about for quite a few years, which is excess is not deficiencies in the soil, and what they're seeing as commonalities, and that nitrogen is certainly one of them, especially in areas like Pacific Northwest, Upper Midwest, that they see a lot of nitrogen being poured in year out, and they do see it as excess because of just how much is running off into the waterways, which knows the soil is not holding it to begin with. So why are we putting so much money in that? So I think that's the farmers see that, but then it does become the question that Jay and Jason and others are working through, which is like, okay, how do I substitute, and how do I move beyond the system, and how do I make sure that I'm still getting taken care of at the end of the harvest? So these are really critical pieces. I live in Illinois, and yes, we can't go fishing at the end of the summer because of the amount of nitrates in the water and nitrogen that's pollution that's going on here, and that's a big issue.
Hey, right across the river from you. And well, Keith, you're not far. We got Keith on here,
Oh,
and
yeah.
last year was his first year. And Keith, I don't remember. Did you reduce nitrogen? Which one of those camps did you fall into your first year using the algae? If you don't mind unmuting and sharing. Well, he may not. I might have caught him while he was going to the refrigerator.
Probably, but no, appreciate. Well, is anybody else on the call want to weigh in on that? Is anybody else looking at nitrogen specifically?
Jay, did you say you cut nitrogen out totally in that trial and your yield was almost similar? Or did you say you cut back?
So I took a 200-acre farm and with a pretty consistent soil type and elevation, and a third of it was full rate, third of it half rate, third of it no nitrogen, and the yield was pretty much flat across the board. I mean, the high mark was 183, the low was 179. So,
And you're using
and that was on a significant amount of acres, I think,
you're
for
using
trial.
624.6 in furrow starter there.
Yes.
Is your soil temp above 50 when you're planting corn?
Yeah, most of the time. Yeah, sometimes I'll, try to wait, but yeah, most of the time, my soil is so heavy, I just can't wait because it gets so hot here in the summertime during
Right.
pollination. I've got to take advantage of the early planting window.
We'll plant corn when soil temps aren't 50 yet, and that's just because it's just sticks around cold here. Now we're hoping that it starts to warm up, but until you get about 50, you're not going to have phosphorus transference through microbial activity. So that's why a lot of guys use an in-furrow starter. And I guess then that goes back to a question for Meredith and Tucker. Do you think EnSoil Algae, with the way it works, if I'm getting this right, metabolites, will they excite that biology to come out of a dormancy and start working on phosphorus earlier so that I could, without fear, take my 624.6 out of my in-furrow so that I don't have to worry about phosphorus? Because I know by using that phosphorus, I'm not getting that early 7-day attachment to a mycorrhizal, because it needs to attach to that root in the first 7 days or it does not form that relationship. And I'm nipping that in the bud by having that phosphorus in furrow. I'd love to take it out, but I have fear that that young cord seed coming out doesn't have phosphorus available to it.
I would actually, Meredith, do you mind if we ask Dr. Ladley? I know he's on the call. Jim,
Yeah.
did you get that question? You're on mute, Jim.
What question was that?
Hey, it was Jason had a specific question about phosphorus as it relates to the algae being able to stimulate enough
Right.
biology for him to remove the phosphorus from his starter. Jason, you want to? Am
I
saying
use
that correctly?
624.6 starter in furrow with my corn, just on the basis that my soil temps are below that 50 to 60 when phosphorus starts to loosen. So I'm trying to get an early form of water-soluble phosphorus available to my corn plant in that early growth stage. And I know I'm cutting off my nose to spite my face because I'm not getting a mycorrhizal association because I'm providing the easy button there with that 624.6. So if I use EnSoil Algae and pull the 624.6, can I use the metabolites produced by the algae to excite the biology at a colder temp?
I would say probably yes. If you look at Midwest soils, there's plenty of P and K that's in the soil. It's been dumped on for how many years? It's just not available because we've taken out the biodiversity. And it's the biodiversity that runs everything. You know, in our program, regenerative program, we focus on biology, energy, and nutrition. And, you know, our job is to make the farmer more profitable and sustainable. And so we're adopting a lot of the things that you've talked about here. My whole thing, the way I kind of look at things is, if you understand life, if you understand nature, you understand life. If you understand nature, you understand God's creation. If you understand nature, you understand how you should be farming. And, you know, I'm 77 years old, and I was raised entirely on the farm, 9 kids, and everything we ate was off the farm. And we were really organic farmers, and we didn't even know what that term meant. But we're all healthy yet. And, you know, so I, anything that will drive biodiversity in anything in life is the foundation to health and performance, period. And so much of what we've done in industrial ag is just the opposite of what we should be doing. We're also in human health in what we're living with. But, you know, so I think that's important. So what we do is we're driving what we call, in a regenerative approach, a natural biocontrol and stay green stacking technology and system. And so everything that we bring into the program, we weigh against that. And so we're doing natural biocontrol with things like chitosan, yucca kohala. And I think now the green algae is another technology that will fit right into that. And from the energy point of view, energy is what drives everything. So the more energy you can produce, the more of a driver you have. And the plant is driven on energy. And we know that comes from the sun, but it comes from the CO2 collection. So, you know, when you look at it really, and it's really kind of interesting. If you ask the grower, what percent of the plant is made out of CO2? And I would tell you that there's probably 1 in 100, if I'm lucky, would understand that. And you say, what is the limiting nutrient? And they all say nitrogen. Then the limiting nutrient is carbon. And the plant is made up of 45% carbon, 45% oxygen. So 9% of the plant is made out of CO2, 6% hydrogen, and 1.5% nitrogen. So 97.5% of the weight of the plant can come out of the air. Now, some comes out of the soil, but when you look at those elements, they're all low atomic weight. Carbon is 12, oxygen 16, hydrogen's 1, and nitrogen's 14. So what puts taste, flavor, and nutrient density and you know, taste and flavor, and builds the high brick aspects of the plant and energy? It's all your heavy atomic weight trace minerals. Like, you know, you got moly at 95, zinc at 63, copper at 63, and iron, you know, at 55, etc. So that's kind of the part that I focus on. And, you know, the atmosphere is made up of what, 78% nitrogen, and it's free. But if you're overloading the soil up front with nitrogen, you shut the whole natural system down. You're not taking advantage of it.
Yeah.
And so what we do is we drop that off as much as we can. And you got a gradient that based on where you're starting with an individual grower. But we've got now biologicals that will give us 50 to 90 pounds of nitrogen with a foliar application in season.
There we go.
There so we can come back when we really need that. And if you have late in corn development, the form of nitrogen that you have available to the plant can make as much as, and I don't have that right in front of me, but you could be looking at 15 to 25 bushel on the form of nitrogen you got available to that plant. And so
Yeah,
there's a
well,
lot of,
I hate to cut you off. We're running out of time
Yep.
today, but let's focus on this in the future. This is a big topic. Nitrogen management is what I'm hearing from this group is worth an hour in itself, I think. So
I just want to make
look.
one other comment. One of the
And
things that we
please
do.
make it quick. We
Okay.
need like 30 seconds or less, please.
Well, go ahead. No, I'll just shut down. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I apologize. We try to keep these to an hour just so that the rewatch is consistent across the board. So thank you guys and everybody for joining us this evening. We really appreciate the discussion and the deep dive into these topics. Meredith or Tucker, I would love you to take it home and wrap this tonight. Appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I'll be quick, but just know we're all here to answer any other questions and to continue the discussion. We definitely want to follow up, Jason, your question about in-field application. I have some ideas there on right recruitment and what the seed needs. So we'll discuss that. Thank you, everyone, for being here and sharing your stories, guys. I really appreciate you being along with us and helping us learn. And having gotten us here. And what we're looking forward to in 2025 is helping more growers feel more confident in these kinds of decisions. And so we've got a great support team built for that. And we're happy, ready for it.
All right. And we always come away with more questions. That's how this thing unfolds. So
That's
to be continued. Thank you, Ryan and Carl and Jay and Jim and Jason and everybody.
Denise.
It's been fun. Denise, looking forward to connecting and seeing you again. So thank you all.
All right, everybody, have a good, happy rest of your winter, and you can learn more at thinkregeneration.com. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing everybody at the next session, and we will have this recording live, or I shouldn't say live, on our YouTube channel early next week. We'll send out a link. So thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.